Now here's the thing with small group. We provide, think tier 2 in an RTI model. What we know is a lot of schools implement the wrong intervention. They implement what we call a mismatched intervention. Particularly when it comes to social, emotional, and behavioral, targeting those areas, it's almost as if you have a kid with a reading deficit and you give them math instruction. We provide mismatch intervention because we have no selection process nor matching process. We just create an intervention, plug kids into it, whether it's the thing they need or not. We have no way of conceptualizing what they should get. We're all familiar with the can't do, won't do distinction, I hope. So if there's one truism, it's this. And if I could impart and have this script run through any educator's mind, I would sear it in through their professional training. And it's something that they can always go to understand why a kid's struggling. And it is this. A child will always struggle if the environment's asking the child to perform a skill they don't possess. So imagine the environment's asking you to read and you can't read. Will you have a problem? If the environment's asking you to comprehend in a language that's foreign to you, are we going to have a problem? So if the kid lacks the skill to meet the environmental demands, you're going to have a problem. Secondarily, you'll always have a problem if the kid possesses the skill but just isn't motivated to use it. You'll always have a problem. So this is the skill versus will dichotomy, or the can't do, won't do. Here's what we see in educational systems. We see won't do interventions implemented for can't do kids. Imagine a behavioral contract for a kid who can't regulate their emotions. That's like using a behavioral contract to motivate a kid to read. What do you need to do if the kid can't read? Teach them stinking how to read. It's a mismatched, wrong intervention. You see check in, check out, which is the PBIS movement, and I'm a PBIS person, but not like, a Kool-Aid drinking PBIS person. Like, you do check in, check out, and everybody gets it because it's the only intervention you have, and it can be a completely mismatched intervention. You have kids who can't do, meaning they lack skills. But just because you have a can't do, you have to hone in and tailor the instruction because not all can't do kids are lacking the same skills. Think about in reading how we would approach this as remedial instruction. Just because a kid's at risk for reading failure doesn't mean that all at-risk kids receive the same instruction. You need to tailor it. Imagine a kid, you do a screener, you identify kids who are deficient in fluency. That doesn't tell you why they're deficient in fluency. They could lack phonics. Then lower than that, they could lack phonemic awareness. So effective Tier 2 remedial academic instruction is providing honed-in instruction. So I'm going to have a homogeneous group of phonemic awareness kids, a homogeneous group of phonics kids, and then I might have a homogeneous group of kids who have word decoding in place, but they're disfluent. They need more guided, repeated reading with performance feedback. I'm going to create the groups and hone in the instruction. So now let's parallel that idea to when we're supporting kids socially, emotionally, behaviorally, and they're a can't-do kid. First of all, we need to determine what skill they lack. And there's generally 3 areas in which we're going to provide can't-do instruction, and we're going to compose homogeneous groups of kids who lack similar. Those are kids who lack social skills. Social skills are discrete behaviors that enable success during social situations. Greeting, active listening, sharing, following directions the first time. They're behaviors that maybe kids haven't had the opportunity for them to be modeled and taught to them. They're can't do kids. They're not won't do. Most kids with social skill deficits are won't do. They can do it, they're choosing not to. The whole intervention isn't. Have you ever done that where you get kids together and you train them and they're perfect in their execution of them? We do this all the time and we teach them and it's the wrong intervention. You need to promote their use in natural situations. So you have kids who are deficient in social skills. Then another group of kids who are deficient in emotion coping. They don't have skills to cope, and not all kids who struggle to cope with their emotions need it in the same area. Some kids struggle with anger. Some struggle with anxiety. Some struggle with just garden variety emotion regulation. So you would hone in within that. And then you have kids who struggle because of executive functioning deficits. They're disorganized in time, space, and materials, and they need help. It's not under emotional duress. It's not that they lack social skills. They can't keep it together. They can't self-regulate. And self-regulation is all about being able to manage self in pursuit of something meaningful. Can you keep it together? Can you keep organized? Can you keep focused until task completion? And we have a lot of kids who have executive functioning. They can start things, they just can't finish them. Or they approach things and they're not ready. Executive functioning deficits. So you figure out what are the can't-do skills and then organize groups and deliver this. Here's one thing we know nationally. The groups that we deliver are non-evidence-based. They're not tailored. We do things like, we created our leadership group for at-risk kids, or we do a lunch group and we just make up stuff. That's what a lot of schools do nationally. They know that kids are lacking and they have a need, but there's no thoughtful analysis of what the need is, what's the curriculum that's going to teach the kids the skills they need to be successful. So this is a more thoughtful approach to doing group-based work, particularly as Tier 2 interventions. A lot of our Tier 2 interventions are for won't-do kids. You have to have both won't-do interventions and can't-do interventions. And you basically funnel kids down to the appropriate care if you're doing a really good job with your Tier 2 support system. Now let me talk about what's out there. Social skills, not all evidence-based social skill curricula are created equally. They're different. They have different scope and sequence. Some are more for kids who need social awareness and pick up on social cues. And then there's other curriculum, so kids on the spectrum. Think about those kids. Those social skills training are different than what I consider typical social skills training for kids who are more environmental casualties, meaning their environments haven't modeled these types of pro-social behaviors, so they need repetition and support to learn pro-social behaviors, which is different than kids on the spectrum or who are kind of like that, who need to pick up on social cues, increase their social awareness, and know when my perseverative interest in the topics I like is I'm reading like you're rolling your eyes, you're now turning, so I can pick up on that, know when to silence that. So let me talk about the difference. Skills streaming is more for your conduct types of kids who haven't been lucky enough to have those behaviors modeled for them. It's more the pro-social. The curriculum exists. It's evidence-based from K to high school. And there's different versions of that. And that's what that one's primarily for. The peers curriculum is more for kids on the spectrum who could benefit from social awareness and social cues. A lot of schools are doing social thinking or superflex, no evidence on it. Doesn't mean it won't be. It's research-based, not evidence-based. The author's making lots of money on that. No data to determine whether it improves. This has been done through rigorous randomized controlled trials. You haven't heard much of it. It's called the peers curriculum because the professor at UCLA has done through a whole developmental process and is gathering evidence before she even disseminates versus develop something just to make money, which is a different model for people. So generally there's a lot of cash validity with curricula, meaning the reason why the person's developing it and saying it works is to do what? Woo, man, there's a lot of money to be made in education. That's why a lot of entrepreneurs are going in and exploiting our vulnerability. They know we want to solve problems and we're eager to help kids, and that means a market. That means advertising, and that means, like Diana mentioned, using the words like evidence-based. So the question is, where's the rigorous randomized controlled trials on those things if it's available? Knowing the curriculum of the Superflex and the social thinking, my prediction is she just needs to partner with researchers and get it because it's good. As I'm sure some of you have used it, you're like, man, I like this. And you see the receptivity, you see some change in kids. It's just not evidence-based yet. So if you want something defensible, you might want to err on something else. Social skills improvement system. How many are familiar with the social skills rating scale? It's the same authors of that have the social skills improvement system. Here's why I like this one. They went and asked teachers, like 1,000 teachers, what are the main social skills that enable academic success? And then they took the top 10 social skills, and those are the first 10 social skills you work on. We call them academic enablers. They're social skills that enable academic success. This has high buy-in from teachers because you're speaking their language. These are the social skills that matter most to being successful in learning situations. So it might be. So you want to tailor and select a curriculum that you think is going to best meet the needs of your context and the kids you're serving. The ACCEPTS program, how many are familiar with Hill Walker? Hill Walker's from the University of Oregon. He's one of the preeminent researchers in our field of like mental health, emotional, and behavioral disorders. He's developed all kinds. One thing, back in the day, he developed the ACCEPTS. This one is really good in terms of the scope and sequence. What it's missing is kind of modernization, if you will. So the role plays, if you use this one, you have to prep. Like good lesson deliveries, you got to kind of liven it up a little because it will go dull if you're just trying to get there and then follow it in session. The content's great. The bells and whistles for the engagement strategies aren't. So you have to work a little harder, but it's potentially really good. Okay, just want to put that one out there. The target audience he's developed across the continuum. Mainly he originally developed from like K-8, but he has an extension high school version for that one. The Prepare program, Arnold Goldstein, who also did anger replacement training, he has his own social skills program that has one randomized control study on it, and it's efficacious. Garden variety social skills training. It's not a social thinking, it's not anything like that. Let's move over into emotion regulation curriculum. So imagine that's for kids who are, your conceptualization is social skill deficits. Now this is for groups of kids who they need help managing their emotions. They need more time learning the skills, practicing the skills in order to build fluency. All I can say about this is it's called Hebb's rule. And Hebb's rule is neurons that fire together wire together. And what that means is a lot of kids might be able to use them, but it takes a lot of effort and energy. So part of what we're doing is rehearsing that. When you get kids to practice, you can alter the structure and functioning of the brain to increase automaticity. So in the heat of the moment, kids can go to those skills and use them without requiring as much effort. And so they're more likely to be successful. So a lot of the things we're doing is building skill fluency. And it means going beyond what we're doing in our little mini lesson and having other people practice and use the skills with the students. So let's break this down. Coping power is one. John Lockman out of the University of Alabama has developed an evidence-based, this is for kids who struggle with anger. So you would hone in. You would have an anger group. In a lot of small group things, particularly with kids with conduct problems, it's called iatrogenic effects. In the literature, it's called deviancy training. If you're not there to manage that group really well, what it's been shown is the kids make each other worse, not better, because they trade maladaptive behaviors. So when you take kids who are more conduct and anger prone, this isn't necessarily true of anxious and depressed, but for kids with conduct, if you're not ready to manage them, and typically we send people who have never learned group management skills, and then they do it and they're like, holy crap, what did you accomplish? Nothing, because the kids were unwieldy in terms of their behavior. You better bring it, or else you're going to make them worse than better. It's been shown. Kids exchange maladaptive behaviors and get worse. Yeah.
So this is designed there to be a group program?
A group.
Can it be modified to be done individually?
The coping power, yes. It has both evidence. It's nimble in terms of that. The beauty of the coping power, it's been designed to be delivered by teachers too. And they have studies where they took experts in mental health on this curriculum and non-experts in mental health, because the assumption was you have to be an expert in mental health to execute it. It's basically a CBT group-based program, CBT Lite. And they found that the non-experts produce equal or better outcomes than the experts. Yes, and some of these, if you're afraid of iatrogenic effects, it's always, we call it stealthy delivery. Don't let the kids think they're getting an intervention. It's how you communicate, and you include typical peers instead of like we look at each other and yeah, it's just us. We're the regular ones up in the office. Yep, we're the ones. Instead, you make kids, it's us, but some other kids. It takes a little more planning and execution, but you generally talk about how you have peer models and things like that. So kids don't feel like it's something wrong with them, and you can dissipate some of the maladaptive behavior exchange. Coping Cat, as you might imagine, this is a curriculum developed by Phil Kindle for anxious kids. And the idea is you're taking scaredy cats and helping them be coping cats. It's a CBT program. Don't mistake, it's a CBT. Designed to be delivered in the context of school or clinic settings. It's been shown to be effective. A outgrowth of Coping Cat is called the Friends curriculum. I don't have it up there. The Friends curriculum is developed in a lot of the research in Australia. And it is a CBT program, a resiliency curriculum that takes kind of garden variety emotions. It doesn't like say just let's talk about anxiety. It says let's talk about emotions. So it's more of like kids who have regular emotional distress. The Coping with Stress course, highly recommend. Multiple randomized control trials, it's free. You can go download and get it. The authors of it aren't trying to make money off of people. So it's absolutely for free. Greg Clark and his colleagues out of the University of Texas Austin developed this and have researched it. It is a CBT program, and it talks about stress in general and how stress manifests in terms of different stuff. This is more secondary, like middle school and beyond.
What's the name of that again?
Coping with stress. Oh, I heard that like over here, but you're over there. Adolescent coping with depression. This is built off of the coping with stress, but hones in on depression. It's only for secondary because prevalence rates of depression increase in secondary age kids. It's not really that prevalent in elementary age kids. Although it can happen, it's rare to have a super depressed second grader. The kid can be on a trajectory towards depression, but isn't depressed typically. It can happen, don't mishear me there. Cognitive behavioral intervention for trauma in school. CBITS is one of our more effective for trauma kiddos. CBITS. This has some of the best supports. It's going to be your most expensive to get trained in. Here's what I recommend. Big picture. If you're in charge of funding in your district, then spend money on getting someone to be a trainer of trainers. Yes, you're going to fork up like $10K, but that person will be in your district and can train multiple people, and the costs are so cheap over the long run. I would recommend getting people trained to be trainer of trainers in Coping Power, Coping Cat, and CBITS, and then the free stuff is available. You have those people. Make sure they're not going to leave your system so you don't invest in them and they decide to say, thank you, I'm going to go start up my little private thing now. So you need to incentivize and keep them. The big picture is you want this in your systems. This is good tier 2 stuff. It's state of the art. The efficacy's there. Now, how are you going to get and build capacity over time so kids can receive that? The emotion regulation curriculum. It is garden variety emotional issues. It's not honing in on anxiety, trauma, depression, or anger. It's just saying, here's our emotional world. We can't let our emotions get the best of us, and teaches regulation strategies that hone in. It's free too. It comes out of Mass General Hospital in Boston, which is one of the best kind of mental health clinics who do a lot of community-based work. Let me talk about executive functioning now. We want to hone in on if this is the overriding issue. The kid doesn't lack emotion regulation skills. It's not necessarily due to that. It's not that the kid lacks social skills, but they're still kind of a mess. These are kids who are self-regulatory messes. As long as an adult's on them, prompting and cueing and serving as their prefrontal cortex, they do fine. Soon as we give them rope, they become a disorganized mess. So these focus on teaching organization of time, organization of materials, and organization of focus to resist distractions. And so there's various curricula available. This handout is in the back because I think we're up with time here. And in terms of the curricula that are available. There's a lot of development in this area because this is a new hot term, right? We have a lot of fads, like executive functioning is a big thing we throw around. Not much in the way of evidence-based. These have studies on them, and they're merging research on each of these different types of curricula. Make sure you're trying to vet it to look at whether these curricula, because people are just throwing mud at this issue because everybody, oh yeah, executive function, we got that. And so people are eager to do something to help kids. There's just not a lot of good programs that we've been shown. Lots of research on programs. Most of them don't produce any effect.
Do any of these focus on the older kid specifically?
Yeah,
Executive function?
the HOPS is kind of late elementary to secondary kids. This one is Lynn Metzer's work is for elementary through kind of middle school. High school doesn't necessarily apply that well. And then this one, the executive functioning skill building program is more secondary.